Sometimes the best choice is the one that matches the tone of the passage as a whole. And typically, at least in the passages we've seen in the PSAT, the tone has been pretty formal, so we're going to generally look for choices that are more formal in tone, that match the what you would write in an essay. You would use certain language and you wouldn't use other language, which is more informal. Now, it is possible that you might get a more informal passage, so you wouldn't want to use super formal language. We'll kind of see an example of this later, but the key is either way, you want to make sure that if you're picking a choice, after you've checked for grammar and redundancy and all the other rules you can check for, that you want to make sure it fits the tone of the passage as a whole. And let's look at some examples. Number 2. One of the big reasons behind workers' lack of sleep is the work itself. So we look at this, and we look at the original, and we look at the grammar, and it seems okay. But the phrase big reasons behind is, number 1, imprecise. But number 2, you might argue it's a bit informal, like a big reason. You wouldn't really say a big reason. So for this reason, we're going to try to find something that is a bit more precise, a bit more focused, and something that matches the tone of this passage, which as you read, you'll see it's a more formal study or report about this issue. So how about B? One of the main things leading up to workers' lack of sleep is the work itself. Again, things, just like big, is an imprecise word, so we don't really want main things. And again, it just doesn't quite match the formal direct tone of this passage, so we can get rid of B. How about C? One of the huge things about workers' lack of sleep. Again, huge things is imprecise. Huge things, what does that even mean? What do you mean things? And again, just doesn't quite match the tone of the passage, so we'll get rid of C. Now, how about D? One of the primary causes of workers' lack of sleep is the work itself. So this is much more specific, much more focused of a choice. It's not using smushy words like huge or big or things, and it's matching the tone, right? You would expect a passage like this to use words like primary causes in this kind of a study. So D is going to be the best answer. Let's try number 19. Given the role that honeybees play in agriculture, the impact of this loss of hives on fruit, vegetable, seed, and nut crops is not to be scoffed at. So we look at, again, the original. Nothing seems grammatically wrong, but we look at the phrasing, is not to be scoffed at. A little bit of an awkward phrasing, number 1. But number 2, scoffed is perhaps not the right word to use in this kind of passage. We want something a bit more formal. Again, this passage is about honeybee, I think, colony collapse disorder, honeybee problems. It's more scientific, more objective, more formal. Is not to be scoffed at, just doesn't quite fit that tone, plus it's a bit wordy, so we can hope to find a better choice here. Let's get rid of A. How about B? The impact of this loss of hives on fruit, vegetable, seed, and nut crops is a pretty big deal. So here's a really good example. This is just not the right tone for the passage, and it's not precise, kind of like the last thing. I mean, you could imagine that there's a link between the tone of something and how precise it is. Something that's more precise is going to have a certain tone, and we're looking for precise language here, not something as fluffy as is a pretty big deal. It's just too informal. We'll get rid of it. C is even worse. Impact of this loss of hives on fruit, vegetable, seed, and nut crops can't be put on the back burner. So not only is it informal, but we have essentially a cliche. Right? Can't be put on the back burner. It's just not appropriate language for a passage like this. How about D? The impact of this loss of hives on fruit, vegetable, seed, and nut crops cannot be ignored. Yeah, nice and clean, nice and direct, would fit the tone of the passage as a whole, so we like choice D. Last one we'll take a look at for this set of errors is 39. Let's see. I'll start here. After a page is transcribed and proofread, it is digitized and becomes part of a searchable online archive. Volunteer transcribers need no particular expertise. Prosaic directives are provided on the DIY history website. A little bit of an opposite situation here. Prosaic directives, not only is it super formal for a passage that is, I'm going to say it's informal, but it is a bit more conversational, I suppose. It's at least a little bit more low-key than the phrase prosaic directives. So not only is it really uber formal, I don't even think, even in a formal piece, you'd even want to say prosaic directives. It's just so heavy in vocabulary words, essentially, that it's much better to use simpler words here rather than something as heavy and leaden as prosaic directives. So we can get rid of A. How about B? Volunteer transcribers need no particular expertise. Simple directions are provided on the DIY history website. Perfect. Nice and clean, nothing crazy. How about C? Bare bones how-tos are provided on the DIY history website. This is a bit too informal, and it's just not as good as B. B is nice and clean and direct. We don't have to get super fancy with it unless we have some good reason. D is going to be the same kind of situation as A. Facile protocols. It's just way too formal. And again, even in a formal piece, like a very formal piece, I would never want to use anything like D. It's just an ugly set of vocabulary words put together. It doesn't add anything at all to the piece that simple directions doesn't do itself. So we're going to go with choice B. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll, and you can find the link in the description below the video.